I also have some Donna information in the chat. And I'd like to just share my screen for a moment to give you the Donna information. If you want to copy any of this down, it's also in the chat where you can copy and paste it. So you can, I just take the donations and mail them all to Tony. So you can send to my house a check, or you can go to my PayPal account, which is right here, and it's case sensitive. I'm sorry, but it's in the chat, so you can copy it. Okay, I won't leave that up long. You can get it out of the chat. Right, thank you. Welcome, Tony.
That's it?
What else should I say?
Oh, I have no idea.
Me neither. I'll leave it to you.
So okay, so Mary Helen's idea of the 30-30-30 is sort of a rough thing, which I actually got from you guys. But tonight I'm thinking maybe we should make it more conversational, because I'm going to be taking up something that's fairly exotic in Dharma circles, and I'm going to offer a different way of conceptualizing the notion of annata. And this is the Buddha said there were three characteristics of our experience: impermanence, no surprise there; unsatisfactoriness, and I guess the question would be, how's it going? And annata. The word annata means not something, and that something is what we're going to be talking about pretty much. It generally is translated as not self. It refers to the basic idea that any idea we have of who we are is a mirage, and yet that mirage is not a mistake. It's a survival mechanism, and it helps us survive. I think of you can think of yourself as sort of a GPS, and you've got this map of the world. You have this understanding of things, what's going on, but you need that little blue dot in the middle so that you know whether you're turning left or right. So that self is really important for using the brain that we've got to make ourselves a survival success. But it doesn't make us leave us at peace, which is where the Buddha was aiming us. So I want to talk about annata. I want to talk about the notion that if this idea of self is a mirage, if it's just a mirage, if it's just an idea, then what's really going on? Because when you think about it, you think you're there. You think you're doing things. You think you own things. You think, don't we? I mean, it's just sort of a default kind of posture. We say, I want things. I do things. Things happen to me. We have that sense of self is very, very much embedded in our experience. But all of the great teachers say that sense of self is a mirage, and that the Dalai Lama says, understanding emptiness is essential to awakening. Emptiness would be another way of saying that there is a self, and it's empty of any qualities, any essence. This is not something that's easy to grasp, and on first blush it sounds totally wrong. I remember my teacher Sylvia Borstein, saying when she heard about anicca, dukkha, and anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and no self, she said, well, 2 out of 3 is not bad. Because people just don't believe this. Still, I think it's important to take a look at it. And what I'm going to do is to offer a model for understanding how behavior can happen without an agent doing it. Without anybody doing anything, behavior can happen. Right speech, right action, right livelihood, the heart of the Eightfold Path, can happen without anybody doing anything. So that's my pitch. So what I'm going to do, we were working with this with my Davis group the other day, and it went okay. It went pretty well. Everybody, but these are people who we've been working together for a long time. So I'm curious to see how this model works for you guys. So at the end, I want to take a minute or two and see how it worked out. But this is a model for how behavior happens. I'm going to share it. And there's a reason for models. Models are just concepts. You know, one of the Zen patriarchs said, if you understand something, you just have concepts. All you've got is concepts. But if you don't have the concepts, then you have ignorance. So the concepts will point at aspects of our experience that we can look at, that we can bring our attention to. We can use this mindfulness skill that we've been cultivating all this time to pay attention to certain aspects of our experience. And when we do that, it may help us see how behavior is just unfolding on its own. Just like the thoughts, you know, when you close your eyes to follow your breath, what happens? Thoughts show up. I know it's not just me. You know, and they just keep bubbling up, right? I mean, that's the experience. They're just happening, unfolding. So what I'm going to do is to offer this chart, and so this chart is, let me explain it. It says conditions giving rise to behavior. I'm trying to orient the there we go. So this conditions giving rise to behavior, and you'll notice that there isn't a self in there. There isn't anybody in there at all. Well, I'm going to start just to notice that in the center, and you guys can see the arrow here moving around, right? Okay. So in the center we have speech, action, and livelihood, or lifestyle, and this would be those elements of the Eightfold Path, the part that's the heart of it. That's the fruit of it, right? Speech, action. And speech, action, livelihood arises out of intention, out of volition. And our intentions happen. We usually say, I want this, I do this. But we're just going to look at intention and see what could give rise to intention without you having to do anything at all. Because intention gives rise to action. On the Eightfold Path, right, intention is the second element, and then you have speech, action, livelihood right afterwards. So right intention, I'm going to start with, these are the four conditions that give rise to intention. Let's talk first about this here. Tanha upadana. Those are the Pali words. This is Tanha upadana. Tanha is the second noble truth, is that Tanha is the source of suffering. It's the condition that gives rise to suffering. And upadana is the actual grasping, the wanting. And actually upadana is usually understood to be greed, hatred, and delusion. Lobha, dosa, and moha, which we translate as greed, hatred, and delusion. This is basically us. These are this condition is the condition of our biological entity. It's what has been cultured by evolution. Tanha comes in three flavors: bhava tanha, kama tanha, and vibhava tanha. These basically, tanha is an abstract word that refers to our dispositions. You can't actually observe tanha directly. You can observe upadana directly in your experience. But tanha is like a preference. If I say this person has a preference for chocolate over vanilla, you can't actually point at something and say that that taste, that touch, that thought is a preference. Preference is an abstract noun that sums up a bunch of experience. You can observe the person getting chocolate ice cream, but you can't observe the preference itself. Preference is an inference in our mind. So tanha is a word that refers to our disposition. Bhava tanha is, bhava, B-H-A-V-A, is usually translated as becoming. And I understand that to mean our disposition to want to be in the future, to want to keep on keeping on. It's the dimension of our self that you might call the survival impulse. I mean, you know, if we all inherited this with our bodies, you know, any ancestor who wasn't really seriously committed to survival didn't live long enough to pass on their genes. So we got the genes of the ones who were really working at it. And and kama tanha, we have a disposition to like things pleasant. We have a preference for pleasant experience, right? I mean, anybody not? Raise your hand. It's a preference, and it gives rise under certain conditions to lobha, desire, wanting. And then there's vibhava tanha. That's ending survival, stopping something from happening. And that is our disposition to want certain kinds of experience to stop, unpleasant and painful ones. And that's a biological advantage, an evolutionary advantage. You know, pain is an alert that there's something about our organism that, you know, pay attention. It gets our attention. And we have a preference to make pain and unpleasantness go away. And when pain or unpleasantness arise, our disposition is to give rise to aversion, anger, frustration, irritation. So tanha, upadana are conditions that are built into our body. They're part of us. You guys have had Rick Maddock visit you some, and he's a neuropsychiatrist. You know, and when you talk to Rick about this, all this connectivity is going to produce thoughts. It's going to produce things. It produces our interest in what's going on, and it's sort of a given as part of the way we are. The Buddha understood it subjectively. He understood the preference for pleasantness and how it gives rise to desire, to kama chanda. And he understood how aversion arose. And, you know, interestingly, if you think about, you know, the First Noble Truth is just a list of unpleasant experiences. So, you know, all those unpleasant experiences are met with aversion, and that makes dukkha. So that's a disposition. That's part of the way we are. We talk about Vedana. Vedana is also conditions our volition. In fact, it is a primary variable because this is the word that refers to, it says feeling tone there. But what that means is the range of feeling between pleasant and unpleasant. It's not like emotional feeling, pleasant or unpleasant. So when you go to the doc and the doc says on a scale of 0 to 10, how is your pain? You can do that, right? I mean, it's not a precision measurement, but it's something you can do. And it's a mindfulness moment. You're actually bringing to mind the feeling of the body. So you can do the same with pleasant experience. On a scale of 0 to 10, just do this for a minute. On a scale of 0 to 10, where would you put vanilla ice cream? Do you have a number in mind? Where would you put a buttered yam? Might also be, if you can put a number to it, it might also, maybe not as much as the vanilla ice cream. I know rubbing my dog is like an 8. It's just fabulous. Nothing like rubbing my dog. So you can put those two scales together, and if minus 10 were the most painful, agonizing experience ever, and plus 10 would be the most ecstatic, pleasant thing you could, beyond which is blackout, and 0 in the middle, you can use this sort of meter, I call it a Vedana meter, you can use this to measure your feeling tone. How are you doing at the moment? But you can also use it to measure your feeling about anything you put your attention on. So you can call to mind, well, I hate to tell you what came to my mind. You could call to mind Barack Obama, and think, where on that scale of minus 10 to plus 10 would he land? Maybe it's not a precision thing, but no. And now take a moment and recall the former guy, and where does he fall? So you're just relating to the feeling tone of thoughts, of what's just thoughts in your mind. Vedana is important because we have a preference for pleasant. We navigate the world in terms of what we think will be most pleasant and productive in the long run. We've got brains, and we make models of what will happen in the future, and we try to decide, what will advance our agenda the best, bhava tanha. And we navigate by pleasant and unpleasant. So sometimes when we find ourselves in experience that we're frustrated about or having trouble, we can use a Vedana meter kind of thing to measure our feeling and bring some mindful perspective to that. So you can see how Vedana will affect your volition, your intention will have an impact, along with our disposition, tanha, upadana. Now let me talk about this one on the bottom. From our point of view, this is the most important. The word is ditthi, and in the first element of the Eightfold Path, samaditthi, is interpreted as right view. And view, in this case, I'll share my understanding of view, because it's our view of the world. It's our understanding of things. I put underneath view, understanding, narrative, or story. There could be right story, right narrative. If I ask you what's going on, you're going to tell me a story. The neuroscience people will tell you that the brain organizes this incredible amount of data that's being generated by the organism in terms of story. So it makes sense. It's how we understand where we are and what we're doing. Some sort of narrative or story. And it sometimes it can be we can have it articulated clearly. We have a story about, oh, I don't know. I pick public events because they're things everybody shares, but unfortunately public events are so unpleasant. But we all have stories about the 2020 election. We have stories about the virus. We have stories about all the things. They're stories. We have narratives. These are our views, our understanding. So some of them are articulable, but some of them we don't even recognize. I have a dear friend who was one of my sociology professors when I was an undergraduate, and even as a graduate student, and he wound up as a sociologist at the architecture school in Berkeley. And they wanted a sociologist there because they wanted their architects to be thinking about how space is used socially. And so he taught a course which he called Holy in Church, Horny in the Bedroom. And the idea is that, we have a sense of appropriateness for physical surrounding. That is view. And it's not even particularly, I don't know how you would articulate that more, you know what I'm talking about. It's, right view is very deep in us. A lot of it is, you don't, how do you feel about Vacaville? That is your view about Vacaville. But when it comes to right view, the Buddha's concern is about our understanding about, the opposite of right view would be delusion. One of the early Zen patriarchs, no, it was Dogen, I'm sorry. Dogen's comment on enlightenment, he said enlightenment is simply enlightenment about delusion. And delusion is delusion about enlightenment. So right view would be to recognize that our notions of things of how things are probably not right. There's a neuroscientist at UC Irvine. His name is Donald Hoffman, and he has a great book called The Case Against Reality, which I recommend. It's neuroscience is recognizing the difference between our understanding of things and the things themselves. So right view would be an understanding that the origin of dukkha is in tanha. That's the teaching of the four truths. That the origin of dukkha is tanha. So that would be right view. But you can see how your understanding of things might shape the way you react, might shape your intention. So Vedana, you might not like being stuck with a needle, but if you've got an understanding that this is going to protect you from COVID, you put up with the unpleasantness. Now, if somebody stuck you with a pin, the same experience you might have, but it would mean something entirely different, and you would respond in a different way, don't you think? Well, maybe it's just me. I would respond differently. So the understanding will affect the way that you respond. It will condition your intention. And here, this is also because this is important because right view is something we are to cultivate. And it would be the understanding, the story, the narrative, of how to live without adding more suffering into the mix. How to live that, so that would be right view, and that would be an understanding that would condition your intention. And it's the one thing that can change, as our practice goes forward and as our practice deepens, our understanding changes. And as our understanding changes, our behavior changes, the way we live our life changes. But if you want to talk about how to make progress, you can tell yourself to be kind to everybody, and you can see how well that works. We can tell ourselves all kinds of things, or you can pay attention to what's going on when you're not being kind, and when you notice that, things will change. They just change because you'll see things differently. Ditti will change, and it will change its impact on intention. These things all work together. Is this comprehensible so far? Okay. Any questions? I see you're all still muted. You can unmute yourself at will. Okay. Everybody's cool up to now. So I'm going to introduce a newish concept. The concept is alaya vijnana, otherwise known as the alaya consciousness. So alaya consciousness. In the Mahayana, this is an idea. It's one of the 8 consciousnesses. It's the 8th. And here's what it is. It's basically the subjective result of all your conditioning, all your experience. So, and it, from the alaya, from this place, things arise in our awareness. So like when you close your eyes to follow your breath and thoughts show up. The Mahayana people would say the thoughts are coming out of the alaya, maybe out of your subconscious. That could be a word to describe it too. It's a memory. Any memory that you have, where does that live? Where does that come from? When you have a memory of something you did that comes up that you did that was nice and you feel good, that's coming out of the alaya. So this is a way of understanding this aspect of our life, of our experience, where habits, habits would arise out of conditioning in our subjective past. Is this a concept that is? It's a very big concept in the Mahayana. I stumbled over it for years because they usually translate it as storehouse consciousness. And I always thought of a warehouse, and it just didn't feel like it had anything to do with Buddhism. But that's just an unfortunate translation, I think. So I think it refers to skills. You train yourself and develop skills. And we have a lot of experience. When you sit down and meditate and thoughts arise, things out of the alaya, the Mahayana teaching is that our relationship to what arises in our awareness coming out of the alaya is what we have to make our peace with. We have to learn to engage skillfully. So you can see how our past conditioning would affect our intention. Any past experience. We might have an intention to have a preference for supporting one charity over another because we've been involved in it. I mean, you can see all kinds of choices that we make based on a past experience. You can see how that would affect our intention. Our understanding of what's going on in the moment and the various layers of that will affect our intention. Our basic biological disposition will affect our intention, and the experience, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, how intense it is, will affect our volition. So all of these things give rise to intention. And you don't have to be there. They just happen in us, and we can look at any of these experiences ourselves. In our own experience, we can look and see upadana. Anybody not noticed wanting? Not noticed aversion and anger? Delusion? Well, we've all noticed it, but we probably believed it. That's what makes it delusion. I mean, we can recognize that. Our understanding, we can articulate that in all kinds of ways. We can, tell what's going on. What is this? Vedana we can experience, and we can look at the things that arise from, I don't know, what phrase would describe that? The depths of our minds? Or even the shallows of our minds? And you don't need an agent to do it. These speech, action, livelihood arise out of causes and conditions. That's what the Buddha teaches with dependent origination, that all things are dependent. No thing exists independent of, in the end, everything else. So, what do you think of this? I'm really interested in knowing whether this is helpful or totally confusing. Probably some of you are totally confused, and some of you, well, okay, Randy, tell me.
Okay. I will admit a bit confusing, and you're describing the linking of these Pali terms to explain human behavior that is common to all of us.
Yeah.
It seems, and other than the awareness of this, which seems to be common to literally everybody, I would think that there would be a further thoughts on how to the realization of these things rising to above them. I don't know, maybe I use the word to conquer them. That's my thoughts.
Okay, so the Buddha's interest wasn't in building a philosophical structure. He was interested in coming up with with ending dukkha, putting an end to dukkha, and so all of the purpose of this chart, which is something this is not only pre-publication but even thinking about publication, is just something we put together the other day. This is in the service of helping us not make things worse, not adding more greed, hatred, and delusion into the mix. Because if we can understand it, if we can watch our experience and have an insight into how it's happening, then there will be a shift in our understanding, which will change our behavior. So what we want to do, so what this is doing is giving us some places to direct our attention, our meditative attention, in the service of figuring out how to let tanha give rise to upadana less. Does that make sense? And so if we can point, what I'm trying to do is to point at these experiences. We can all, we can all experience these. We can all direct our attention to this as real experience in our life. And this isn't philosophical stuff.
Yeah, I do understand that. I see
Yeah.
that.
So the idea is when you can see how this stuff affects volition, it's all happening on its own. And all we can do is navigate this experience skillfully without hurting ourselves or others. And taking our joy where we can, certainly. But chasing happiness, the pursuit of happiness, that's a con. If you're pursuing it, that's presumably since you don't have it. And if you don't pursue it, then you're stuck with the way things are, which may not be what you want. Could be unpleasant. Anyway, so the purpose of this chart is to try to articulate an understanding that will enable us to watch what's going on, observe what's going on mindfully in our day-to-day without falling for the delusion, for the mirage of self that shows up all the time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Good.
Makes
Good.
sense to me.
Any other thoughts? What do you think of Mark? You're muted, so everybody's muted.
Yeah, I'm thinking that this is kind of complicated. That sure, all these things affect our thoughts, and what you have down here is intention and volition. And I guess it's kind of a worthy goal to be able to analyze, to be able to just be aware of that whatever's going on has a lot of sources, and that if we're aware of them, maybe we can be a little bit smarter in our choices.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dependent origination is there's a lot of things going on. Yeah, Mary Helen.
But more than that, it's like more revolutionary than that, in that what you're saying is that we've got thoughts without a thinker, speech without a speaker, everything that's speech, action, and livelihood is all happening without a self.
Yep.
And that's really helpful to me to see what are those things that give this illusion of self. I can hardly wrap my brain around it because myself says, don't be ridiculous.
Those intentions are mine.
Yeah. My intentions.
I think it's as simple as not owning anything.
Yeah, that's certainly, if you can do that. I've had thoughts about that, and would you just take all your furniture and put it out on the sidewalk tonight and put up a sign that says free?
No, owning anything. Sort of like not taking things that they're mine, not owning anything. Like, that if this is true, I don't own it.
Of course. It's just happening on its own. It's just, a description of conditions as they unfold.
Yeah.
And if there is no upadana, if there is no greed and no aversion, no lobha, no dosa, and no moha, then what would there be? There would be equanimity. There may be pleasant and unpleasant experience, but one would respond to pleasant experience by enjoying it, and unpleasant experience with compassion rather than with aversion and anger. Don't you think? So,
Yeah,
Yeah, I like that.
I think
yeah. Go
perfect.
ahead. Go ahead, Susan.
I think a perfect example of how that works is the Alokavihara nuns who were just threatened by the Calder fire, and they remained very calm. And they did that. It took some of the property, it took some of the kutis and some of the things, but their house and the garage remained, where they have sleeping facilities for guests. Um, and they just start from there again.
Yeah, because the only other response would make things worse.
Yeah.
Anger, frustration. You know.
I mean, you can have sadness.
Yeah. Well, sadness is on that list of the first unpleasant truths.
You can have sadness.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah, it does. Stuart.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry, Susan. Did I cut you off?
No, that's all I have to say.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Stuart.
yeah, Tony, I don't get it. I, you know, I, well, question number one is, are you suggesting that no self is a very real place, and it's only a place that is available to someone who has right view, who has an absence of desire or uh, uh, mindfully present at every moment, whatever it takes to be enlightened.
So I would think, that this notion of self, you might profitably think of it as a mirage. So for a mirage, you still see it. You see it out there. But once you understand that it's the reflection of light from the sky off of rising heat, refraction index, and whatever, you know that it's an illusion. That doesn't mean you don't see it. You just don't chase it looking for water. And so the idea here is that the self, who you think you are, whoever you think you are, whatever is a mirage. And that there is just this experience we're in the midst of. And part of the mirage is a delusion. And so we act out of that delusion. And most of the great masters have said that is what brings us suffering. The idea here is to give us a way of thinking about our behavior without thinking that it has to be coming from us. So we can watch, we can observe our behavior, we can observe our intentions arise, and sort of keep an eye on them. And when the unskillful ones show up, and they will, we can sort of just sort of refrain. You know what I mean?
So,
Calais is anonymous or something. So I'm not sure whether that helps, Stu, but
yeah, so it strikes me that it's like, such a major issue or a major presentation about existence, and yet it's something that is uh, it it's something that is not tactile, um, and um, I'm just wondering about the whole sense of dismissing self as an avenue of understanding what no self might be, um, and and having that be a feature of or an avenue of understanding what this is about.
Well, the idea here is to look at our experience rather than do philosophy. Philosophy is really fun for me, and I like it. But the idea here is to provide a map for looking at our experience, so that we can see if this is what if we look at these elements and decide that, yep, that seems to be what's going on. Well, that's going to be a very different idea of what's going on than if you think it's just going to be a different idea than if you think you're behind all this. Once you see that you're not behind all this, then the question is, oh my gosh, how do I go about not making it worse? And why? Because we're designed to want things less painful. So there isn't anything off this map here. I would like to learn how to make things less painful. What do I have to know to do that?
Hmm.
So we can cultivate right view, which is the first element of the path. Yeah, go ahead. You're muted.
I would respectfully ask for those that are not speaking to all mute themselves. There's some sort of feedback coming through.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So any other thoughts here? This clear for everybody? No questions, issues, nothing muddy or this is a teaching. Go ahead, Mary Helen.
It's just to add to what you're saying about this kind of emptiness of the self in this environment. There's also this emptiness of the environment. So it's getting empty around here. And it's like this self that doesn't exist is sort of creating the environment. We think that it happens and we respond to it, but really it's a little different from that.
Well, you act on delusion, and it has real consequences. I mean, race is a delusion, but racism not a delusion. Um, and when people are deluded, they act out of delusion. And when you act out of self-interest, you get a life of self-interest. Janie, you unmuted yourself. Were you going to say something?
No, I just was unmuting myself because I hear that
Ah,
feedback. Oh,
ah, okay. Any other thoughts out there?
Yeah, Tony,
Hey, Al.
so it seems the Alaya, the Vedana, and Tanha interact tremendously.
Tremendously.
And so, yeah, that to me, the picture makes it look almost like they're independent influences. And anyway, just, visually, whatever.
I totally agree. And the idea with teasing them apart this way is to provide some direction for your attention. Once you start touching, Vedana, you're going to find Upadana, and you're going to find, your views have feeling tone to them. Your understandings. How we measured, Trump and Obama and ice cream and Brussels sprouts. Where on that scale, where would you put Brussels sprouts? Some people will put them down there in the minus, and some people will, you know what I mean. So all of these things, plus your experience, they all are indivisible really in our experience, but the way concepts work, the way our brain works, using nouns particularly as a sort of a snapshot for us to hold in mind something so that we can use this brain to figure out what's best for us. And we really use it. So these are concepts which help us isolate aspects of our experience for examination. But like the Buddha said, his teaching is a raft, and you don't carry the raft on your head once you finally reach the other side. So these concepts they're valuable for pointing at our experience. So they're valuable to the extent that they help us reduce dukkha. But they aren't pearls to,
The other comment I'd have is that that right view may lead to behavior, that's consistent with the Brahma Viharas, but
absolutely.
But getting to right view, I think, or most of us certainly, involves the step of, as a self, seeing ourselves as a self, making a conscious intention to, follow the path, watch our behavior, all those kinds of things. So anyway, so the dropping away of the self, I think, often involves the step of believing in the self and moving in that in that direction.
Well, I would say that the idea of a self is a view, and Pali the word is Sakya Ditti. So so the idea of the self is a view, and there's a desire to make things more pleasant, right? And so we've learned, because we've been doing this practice for a while, we've learned that something's going on and things are better. So we've got this understanding. Maybe we don't really have it locked in, just what's going on, but what's going on, we got this view that it helps, so we'll keep on doing it. That doesn't require that you do anything. All that has to happen is there's a thought that this will be good for what we want, which is pleasant experience. So you can take this model, and whenever you start to see this is something you would do to move in this direction or that direction, that's just a thought, and the thoughts condition your intention, of course.
Yeah, and for me, the thought is this will be better for me.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Of course. I didn't say the mirage goes away. It's just we don't believe it is we don't take it so seriously. Oh, but we do take it seriously if, we think we might get COVID, right? We take it seriously. So the idea is to study ourselves how we are, rather than trying to figure out how we should make ourselves over. Because change here comes with change in understanding.
I think I can view changing my understanding as making myself over in some sense.
Yeah. Anything else, you guys?
I think that the change arises
Yeah.
that it doesn't, it's not a makeover. It arises and you notice the arising and you notice the change.
Yeah.
And it might not be like huge. It might just be a little bit
Yeah.
at a time.
Yeah.
Um, the the change arises, and so it's like you say, not a makeover.
Right.
Good.
Diane.
I've always seen my the impermanence of myself in kind of the lyrics of this Fiona Apple song where she talks about she only has one thing to do, and that is to be the wave she is and sink back into the ocean. That process of impermanence and change, kind of like a wave in an ocean, you know. I don't know, but it works for me right now that I am and I am not at the same time.
Well, that's certainly, if you were to describe what this chart is about. I mean, we feel we are. The mirage is real. The mirage is real. It's just a real mirage. And so we are real, but we also aren't. In later Mahayana teachings, the Madhyamikas, that Nagarjuna, he talked about two truths: the conventional truth and the ultimate truth. And basically, they're just two ways of describing this experience from a different perspective, from different perspectives. But the ultimate and the conventional, both of them are right in their way. And so you are and you are not, both are true in their way. And what's really going on is just the experience right now.
So,
Yeah. Go ahead, Diana.
all of this here seems like it's just loosening up who you think you are. I mean, loosens everything up so you can flow easier in one direction or another.
I'll buy that. The story about it was a cartoon in the New Yorker about the drunk who comes into the bar and says to the bartender, "Do you have any idea who I think I am?"
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
So it seems like it would make it easier to go in one direction or another. What's the flow, maybe.
Yeah, it doesn't offer you anything to cling to.
Right.
Because all of that stuff is going to be constantly changing.
Right. I don't know.
I know, just
Flow.
takes what's useful, and the next time it comes around, it may seem to have different contours.
Tony, so would you say our walking the path is kind of just our unfolding, and that there is no volition, or
Oh, there is volition.
but okay, in the larger scheme of things, though, it's our unfolding in a way that that we as individuals did not participate in.
Well, do you have any recollection of choosing to be here in the first place?
No.
Yeah, I just happened to me too.
Anyway, so but I do have thought about showing up tonight, whether,
Of course, that's a thought.
anyway, but yeah, but it's a thought that, like all the rest of it, is unfolding in its natural,
Yeah, it's unfolding.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
so anyways, yeah, so to me, that kind of gives a new meaning to volition. If that volition has nothing personal about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
It's amazing because as soon as you see that it's not personal, it's easier to watch. It's easier to observe. Less identification happens. There's more freedom from it when it's seen that way, and that can be very helpful.
It also comes close to things like, I'm not saying it's the same, but it comes close to things like predestination.
Oh, I don't think so there, because there's nothing in existence to be predestined if we're going to be talking about those levels.
Right, but I think a lot of people, myself maybe included, think of predestination as something where we don't particularly participate. And
well, so here this solves the problem because it says there isn't a you to participate in the first place.
right. Yeah, for sure.
Question?
That gets you off the hook. Yeah.
Quick question. Well, like lifetime question. But so if we kind of embrace this to some degree and it starts to loosen up the grip on the self, I'm not feeling like it's going to make it any easier to die.
Well, it depends on how you die.
Well, just thinking about it is really what's happening, not the dying.
Thinking about it is not the same thing. So don't just,
That's
thinking
true.
about it. So bring that Vedana how does it feel when you think those thoughts? What are those thoughts? Unpleasant. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, everybody. Janie, don't go away.
All right.
So good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I will-
Tony.
Thanks,
Tony,
Tony.
I'm going to make you the host and then I can leave.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Thank you, Tony. It's good to see you.
Thank
again.
you. Good night,
Thanks.
everyone.
Thank you,
Good
Tony.
night.
Thank you, Tony.
See you next month.
Yes.
Stop sharing your screen, Tony, if you
Oh,
could.
stop sharing my screen. Good
Probably a
idea.
good idea.
Yeah.
For some reason,
There.
oh, there you go.
Now we can wave to each other.
Mary Helen,
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember me or not, but I'm on Gold Country Writers. With you.
Oh, Randy, right. I knew you looked familiar in your
I didn't know
name.
you were a meditator.
Yeah, isn't that fun to have two things in common? I like that. We'll have to talk sometime.
Anytime.
I'll see you again, I'm sure.
Great to see you, Randy.
Tony, it was so good to see you. And I hope that I will be back soon to see you again.
Great. I look forward to it. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Good
hope
night,
everything's
Diane.
going great with you.
Good night.
Good night.
Night,
Good
everyone.
night.